Hello, class. For exercise 1 this week, I want you to come up with 3 different non-representational or abstract compositions, 30 minutes spent on each. And the object of this exercise is to try to express specific emotional or psychological states within each of these 3 boxes that you set down on a single sheet of newsprint. And you can be creative in where you place your boxes. The proportions can change. You could try working with a square or a very long box. If you want to, you can even make a rhombus or a non-rectangular shape to make your drawing in. And the point of this is to use mark making and use the values and use composition to create 3 very different effects with the materials. And I want you to be using mainly the compressed charcoal and the white pastel so you can utilize the value ranges. So here I have just some examples, and something that might be useful is you could play 3 different songs for the different rectangles to help steer you in the direction of the emotion you want. So I've given some examples of emotions and psychological states, but you guys can get kind of creative with this. And set a timer for 30 minutes when you're working. So I've already laid down a ground on these 3 zones in my drawing. And so I put the compressed charcoal down here, roughly with texture. I put the soft charcoal here and smoothed it. And then this I will work without setting a ground. And so the first thing I want to show you is that I'll work on this larger one first. So I've decided to take the mental state of feeling unstable. And so for that, I want to focus on cracks in the texture of my non-representational form. And just remember, non-representational means I shouldn't be able to tell what the subject is, but you can still show 3-dimensional form. I just shouldn't be able to tell that it's, say, a cat face or a witch riding a broom. If you make representational subject matter, you're more likely to focus and spend time trying to make it look like the thing rather than focusing on the aesthetics. So I'm going to wipe this ground, and I'm just going to be a little creative with working with the texture that's already presented. For the more chaotic emotions or destructive mental states, you want to be thinking about asymmetry, probably a lot of diagonals, a lot of contrast. For emotional states that are more peaceful, symmetry, softer transitions from values. So to get this idea of unstable, I think I might start cutting in with some diagonals. Diagonals tend to give a sense of instability to a composition. And I really want you guys to be exploring texture and mark making within this as well. And one thing I didn't cover in the mark making lecture is that marks can actually happen on top of a smooth blending. So unlike if you were preparing something for an etching, with drawing, you can stagger marks on top of blended areas. So right now, this is a little too orderly or unstable for me. So I'm actually going to, in my own practice, I work a lot with the unpredictable. So sometimes I'll just wipe back a drawing and rework. And I just try to pay attention to when there are strong moments or things I want to keep within a composition. And since you guys are working non-representationally, you can move pretty fast. You don't have to be careful in detail in some ways. Not to say that you can't have detail in a non-representational drawing. That should be something that you do try to cultivate. But in the beginning stages, laying down your values, getting the drawing set up, that could happen a little faster than if you're working from a reference or a subject from life. So I'm going in with the white Conti now. I decided that to get the feeling of unstable, some slight diagonals with almost the suggestion of planes of glass might be kind of interesting. Piece is not quite fitting. I'm going to take my paintbrush to do a little blending. And then the last thing I'll do for this demo is I'm going to leave some marks because I want you guys experimenting with mark making on these. So to give a sense of instability, I'm actually going to use my eraser and my ruler to leave some marks. So when you think about textures and marks in a drawing, I want you to think about variety, that if I covered this whole drawing in these marks, I think this particular strategy would lose its unique place in the drawing. So you want to think about different areas of the drawing contributing something different, and then whether or not you want to transition or how you want to transition the differences. So I'm distributing less of these marks further away as a visual transition to the rest of the drawing, and then they can cluster more over here. These are marks created by the eraser in combination with some shading. And then I'm going to go along with what the drawing is already doing, and it's darkest up here. So let's just push that further. Let's be careful with it. So think about variety in your drawing in terms of areas of value, in terms of marks, in terms of material use. Practice also laying down quite a bit of material for these drawings. Some of you are still way too hesitant and timid and kind of frugal with your material. You can see how much material it takes to really start building a compelling effect. Maybe even here where it gets lighter, I might introduce some of the white Conti to help push that contrast. So it gets lighter at the bottom. So that's an example for a more chaotic and asymmetrical emotion or mental state. And so now I just wanted to fiddle around for something that's more tranquil. So let's say our word for this one that doesn't have a ground is calm. So for calm, we're going to limit the contrast, stay in lighter values. So I'm going to start with the soft charcoal, and I'm going to use atmospheric perspective, even though this is non-representational, to suggest a landscape. And with varying amounts of pressure, I can suggest atmospheric perspective. I'm going to take this paintbrush to do a little blending. So one thing I'm noticing, if I want this to be calm, I want to get rid of the shakiness of this line. So I want to give a feeling of an unbroken, continuous line. Okay, so let me just show you guys using the eraser to clean up those rough lines, and then I'm going to use my paper towel, and I'm not touching the bottom line of that erased mark because I want it to be sharp. I'm only blending up at the top to ease this transition. And then because this is the newsprint, the white pastel really has a presence on this paper, so I'm going to utilize it. So that's the start of my composition for calm. You can see it's much more symmetrical, less jarring contours, more horizontals. And I want to give a soft texture of smoothness, almost cloud-like or water-like. So even though these forms are non-representational, they still allude to real-world subject matter. This feels like broken glass. This feels like waves or hillsides. So just keep that in mind. Let's say for the last, we could do something like opposition. And this can be a little more conceptual, where I could work with symmetry. Rough texture to this one to show movement. With a sensation of this form being crushed. I actually really like those marks, so I think I might leave those for now. So just want to get the sensation of sort of compression here. So opposition is a lot more complex than calm or unstable. So I think if I were to keep working on this, I would keep thinking about how the imagery could really feel like it was giving the effect of a visual conflict. Disturbing the surface might be more useful there. So that's just the start of what I would do for something like opposition. It's not necessarily doing what I wanted to do, but I think the other two are good demonstrations. So be creative, have fun with it. Maybe try specific music that gets you in the mood for these different psychological states.